We couldn't have planned it better if we tried. Bo Horvat is now a member of the New York Islanders. We learned that not just a couple hours ago that this trade went down. James sent me a text. I thought you were kidding. I was like checking if they were a verified account from the Vancouver Canucks, because he didn't even send the Islanders Twitter account. He sent the Vancouver. So I thought it was a joke. I was looking for a typo. Right. I didn't believe the verified badge. And then Twitter was just ablaze with this. It was a little bit crazy. I think I'm still processing this. What's your kind of initial reaction to it all, as we because there's a lot of time to think about this, given that their next game is not for another week. What's your initial kind of thought on this?
My initial reaction to the trade at all was the first announcement being from Vancouver. And I said to myself, fucking Lou. This is so Lou Lamoriello, keeping this whole thing under wraps. There was, whispers that Horvat was, going to be traded sooner rather than later. That was making progress. And everyone should have known that when no one could link a single team to which team Horvat was making progress going to, we probably should have said, yeah, maybe we do know where he's going to go, because it's going to be the Islanders, since nobody can pinpoint where he might go, right? The announcement comes from Vancouver, not the Islanders at first. Even Friedman and Marek and Saravalli didn't have it until after the teams put it out already. So my initial reaction was, this is such a Lou Lamoriello thing to do, have a huge trade like this and no one know about it. And Vancouver makes the announcement, not Friedman, not Saravalli, not Kevin Weeks, not David Pagnotta. No, Vancouver makes the announcement, right? So that was my initial reaction. Then I digested the trade and I was like, whoa. They traded Aatu Räty. I didn't even say that about Anthony Beauvillier. It had been a foregone conclusion for me since the summer that he was going to be moved at some point. The first round pick,
he was a perpetual breakout season candidate. Anthony Beauvillier,
correct,
needed a fresh start so badly, and I honestly hope he kills it. I hope he, I don't think it's going to hurt Islander fans' feelings any, and he's going to get a huge reception when he comes back to Long Island. He scored some huge playoff goals, and I'm almost a little excited for that, right? Because we get our guy in Bo Horvat, but maybe Beauvillier actually gets the kick in the pants that he really needed, as comfortable as he was, perhaps a little too comfortable. But I'll let you continue.
So, my initial reaction was like, Beauvillier was a foregone conclusion that he was going to be moved for me. The first round pick, same thing. It was, wow, they traded Aatu Räty. I'm a little stunned by that, because after Aatu Räty, it's a toss-up for who the next best prospect is in the pipeline. I'd argue it's Samuel Bolduc, at least in terms of his progression right now.
And he's been in the pro game a little bit longer than a Dufour, and
right,
has had, I think, a little bit more success even in the AHL level than Simon Holmstrom, who is, another player that it's not quite highly touted, but is still good. He could still be something. I think it's really hard to tell when players are that young. And right now you can say he's projected to be a third line winger, and that might be really good. And hell, that's actually kind of important, depending on the construction of the team in the future. But there's room for growth. He's still super young.
Right. So, then I thought about, well, what did the Islanders get? They got Bo Horvat, who already has 31 goals in 49 games. The Islanders need one thing. It's goal scoring. And what they gave up for at least right now, because they're trying to get into the playoffs and they're trying to add to the roster they have right now, because that's what they see is viable moving forward. Add to this roster now. What do we need? We need goals. What they subtracted wasn't goals. They subtracted, a little bit of youth, but they also got a 27-year-old in his prime, who has some years left playing at a high level, in my opinion. Now, is he going to match this 50-goal pace year after year? Probably not. Is he going to score you 25 to 30 goals? I would think that that's reasonable to ask from him for the next, 3 years. Now, we don't know if that's going to happen, because he needs an extension that has yet to be signed. However, initial reaction, they needed goals. They got the best guy available to do that right now, right? No, who else is available that's better at scoring goals than David? I'm sorry, than Bo Horvat right now. Yeah, that I think it was a good trade. They did what they needed to do, and if until we learn the extension won't be signed, if that happens, this is a good trade because I'm going forward thinking that Lamoriello doesn't pull this trigger without knowing at least he's got a sense of confidence that it's heading in that direction.
Yeah, and I think as you said, he's 27 years old, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, at least early on in the show, that if you missed the title, uh, we do have Chris Botta of Hockey Night in New York and longtime VP of the New York Islanders communications team for many years of you know a kind of a little bit ago, but the recent enough where he still has a lot of really good insight, and his analysis of all this is really great. And well, I asked him this question and a couple others. I will try to get to it because we kind of gave him the floor here because, like I said, he's got a lot of wisdom and insight there. But do you think Horvat really helps his team to the point where they're one or two pieces away from being a legit contender, and does it open the window a little bit? I have my opinion, but I'll say it after you're done.
I don't know if it opens it longer, but I think that they're better in the short term, right? Again, assuming he signs an extension for 2 to 3 years, I think the Islanders have a better chance of, going further than they would have with yesterday's roster. Um, that being said, I also speculate as to whether or not they're done, right? They got Horvat, which is great. Now they had to figure out what the lineup's going to look like, right? We don't know what the future looks like for Oliver Wahlstrom. Who's going to be shifting out of the center position? Because there's, that line that I've been, banging the drum for in Lee Nelson and Barzell. That leaves Horvat centering the second line with who? You would want it to be Wahlstrom, but he's not there, right? So you're looking at Kyle Palmieri, you're looking at Josh Bailey, right? We don't really know what that looks like. I don't love having Josh Bailey on the second line. Maybe Zach Parise goes up there. I still don't even love Zach Parise being on the second line. So I'm sitting here and I'm almost wondering, are they done? And I'm not sitting here saying it has to be something huge, but could you imagine if the St. Louis Blues agreed to move a Vladimir Tarasenko on the cheap? A
Okay,
31-year-old who
I think that's too
I hear
far. They
you.
don't have the
It's
assets at this
it's a
point.
lot.
It's
No, they
something
don't.
it's
They
something
don't.
else. It's something
It,
else that they could do. And I also disagree with you leave Lee and Nelson together who are playing well, and you
yeah.
put Horvat and Barzell. And frankly, and I asked Chris this in a different way before, and partly because I knew we were going to do this after we interviewed Chris, was I think it takes a lot of the pressure, the center position off Barzell, and he could play much more freely. And Horvat will provide that support. Barzell's been terrible in the faceoff dot. If only for that, adding a center to that top six. So having those two in your top six, those two pairs anyway in your top six, and then you can put Palmieri on that first line with them, and then have Bailey play with Lee and Nelson. I don't think that's ideal until Wahlstrom comes back. Um, I think that's the hang up right now is the injuries. I think that fourth line, Holmstrom isn't long for this team. You have to put Hudson Fasching now that Clutterbuck's out on that fourth line with Zizekas. It definitely shifts it around quite a bit. It doesn't mean they're not done. There very well may be a depth piece coming. I like to think that's a defenseman, a veteran defenseman. That just seems like a Lou move to me. But Horvat, as far as the offense is concerned, I say put him with Barzell and run with it. I can't see another way of going about that. You have to give him a shot, and not just a game. This isn't like one of those other things where you're putting Holmstrom here and Palmieri there and Wallstrom this and you're moving players around. Give them an honest shot together to get some chemistry and hopefully run with it.
So here's how our buddy Joe Pantorno sees it working out, which is interesting because I don't know if Barzell's ever played on the left side, but he has first line Barzell, Horvat, Zizekas. Second line Lee, Nelson, Palmieri, Parise, Pajot, Holmstrom, Martin, question mark, Bailey. Now, and he mentions Ross Johnston is somewhere in there. Now, the Islanders have 7 days to evaluate what that fourth line center spot is going to look like. I don't know if anyone really is ready to come up through Bridgeport. I mean, you might be looking at like a Cole Bardreau, or which I don't think that that's even good enough. Otto Koivula has been down there
Koivula.
forever, right? Like, I wonder what that fourth line centerpiece looks like. At some point, maybe it could be Bailey when Wallstrom comes back and like Parise gets knocked down a notch or something like that. But they got to figure out that fourth line center spot right now if Zizekas is going to continue to play the wing. And I think the reason why he speculates him staying there is because he's been playing there so well.
It's definitely something I think, if thinking about how Lemuel likes to construct his teams and how the Islanders have just done that over the last 4 years, and 5, including this one, is that they're strong up the middle. And part of the reason Cizikas was on that line with Barzell was because Barzell, like I said, was not doing well in the dot, and Cizikas has historically been better and has kind of continued to do better than Barzell. He's also played well just in that role on that line. Now you don't really need it. Now kind of anybody works there. I say anybody, like a Wallstrom might actually really be a better fit on this line as it would be constructed. Palmieri might do better on that line. Hell, Parise might do better on the line. All that's to say, you have your two star players. That third person can just not be a liability and go hard to the net. Ideally, it might even be an Anders Lee would be a really good way to do that. I don't think that they should, given again how Nelson and Lee have been playing. I do think Zizekas just goes back down and plays on that fourth line. I don't know if there's been any update on Fashing. Even if it is Bailey or Holmstrom on that fourth line, I think that's fine. I don't know what that means for that winger role. Like, I don't know who else is on the roster that can make that happen, frankly. There's no one else besides John. They just gave up 2 roster players for one. So they're missing somebody. I don't know how they proceed. Like it.
This is why I speculated if they're done. I feel, and again, I know I said Tarasenko before. If they, St. Louis is going to move him on the cheap, I don't think that happens. But for argument's sake, could it be somebody a little cheaper that could plug in somewhere in the middle six? Maybe an Athanasiou from Chicago, something like that.
It could be something like that where again it's speed. He's still pretty young. He might be his later 20s.
Yeah.
But best I can remember, he's a fast player that can put the puck in the net. I don't know how regularly he's doing it these days in Chicago, but if memory serves, he's a pretty good forward. It's hard, and I think the deal overall I like. I don't think I mentioned that in the interview with Chris, so I'll say it beforehand. I do like the deal. The extension is what this really hinges on, frankly.
Yeah.
And what happens if they don't and they quote, it's not flipping him because I wonder if you can get, they know the position the Islanders are in. And just kind of like the Canucks, although that deal seemed, Pavillier, a protected first round pick that's top 12 protected and slides to 2024 is pretty good. And out to Ratu, it does kind of hinge on if this player in Horvat's going to be around. Then I do think it opens the window, as you said, not longer but wider, and it provides a little bit of an opportunity depending on what that number is and who Lamoriello can unload this summer and kind of retool on the go here. And you've seen other teams kind of go through this too. So it's not crazy that Lamoriello is kind of doing this given the lack of prospects. Look at the Penguins. Every year they're still in it. And while you have certain
Yeah.
players, you just got to go for it. And I'm not at all comparing what the Islanders have, especially considering their lack of success in comparison, but to like a Crosby and a Malkin Letang. That's not necessarily what the Islanders have. It's still really good. And now that you have a Horvat, Barzell, pretty good center group, Dobson and Sorokin, I don't know. That's a pretty good start to a retool, even if they make the first round this year and lose. I think that's okay. It really matters what happens in the second half of this season, how impressed Horvat is, and ultimately just kind of getting him signed sooner than later so that they can figure out what they're doing in the offseason. So I think this is good. As I said multiple times and earlier, just a few minutes ago, Beauvillier was a perpetual breakout season candidate, and he just wasn't going to do it on Long Island. Ratu was tough to give up. That was a steal. It was somebody that I think would eventually make an impact. He's still so young that I think this is a lot like Romanov, that you trade that first round pick for somebody that is already kind of established NHLer that has a bright future. And it's all about who's making an impact on your roster. Not everybody in the NHL is a first round pick. So if you can get impact players that fit into your roster and it can move this team forward, I think that works. And that's what Lou did last summer with Romanov. And it's largely kind of worked. I think there's some continuing changes that can be made on the back end. I think they've, as you said last week, between Witherspoon and Bolduc and Aho and what they had, maybe I'm wrong and they don't get that veteran D man. They know, like, for a quote run, if they even have the roster space. That all depends on who's getting sent and down. Right now they have 3 roster spots open out of 23. Clutterbuck's not coming back. It doesn't really seem like Wallstrom's coming back. I don't know about
Right.
finishing. Both are both listed as out indefinitely. I don't know if Cap Friendly says it.
But I know Wallstrom is listed as that. I don't think Fashing is listed as out indefinitely.
No,
I think
not
his anticipated return is after the break. But Wallstrom,
Clutterbuck and Wallstrom.
Clutterbuck is out indefinitely. So, and this is why I'm sitting here saying, are they done? Like, clearly they need to get the results heading to the trade deadline in order to continue to buy. But if they do, like, they need somebody now. Now the problem is they need a winger still. I shouldn't even phrase it that way. It's not now the problem. The problem still is they need a winger. Now, do they need one that is as luxurious as we've mentioned in the past? Probably not now, because like we said, they have a Horvat to do the heavy lifting, scoring the goals. But they need somebody on the wing, whether it's top 6, middle 6. It's one of those. And again, they're not going to go get a Meyer. I highly doubt they're going to get a Tarasenko, but it's got to be somebody who can, fit the middle 6 mold, right? The first line they could figure out with what they have in Barzell and Lee and Nelson, and any mixture of those 4 guys can be a legitimate first line. And if they split it up 2 and 2, like you said, that's good too. But they need another winger in this fold, because who's going to be. I love Zizekas and what he's been doing. I just don't know if it's sustainable to keep him there when now the center depth has kind of taken a hit without Ratu there. You're missing Wallstrom and Clutterbuck, so you kind of have to have these, one of these guys placed, 4th line center, and Zizekas has been doing it for so long, so he should probably go back there at this point. And they could hopefully acquire somebody for the wing. I don't know who that guy is.
Back, I think you can move up. And this is This is, of course, barring any trades that happen for a winger, right? I don't think any of this is ideal, but you only have a few options, frankly, for next to Barzell and Horvat. It's either going to be Palmieri or Bailey, right? If Fashion comes back and he's playing on the fourth line, it shouldn't be Holmstrom, which leaves you two players. I want to believe, is Horvat a left-hand shot?
That's a good question. I can look it up.
I don't know. Like, I think that's what they might be asking these players when, like, all right, the line construction. I don't know how, coaches really do that in the NHL. I imagine it's like, there's Barzell, who's a righty.
Horvat is a
What
lefty.
did He's a lefty. So like that works out with Horvat being a lefty. What do you need on that other side as a winger? I believe Barzell prefers to play with a righty there. I think so. It works out that you have a lefty as a center, and they both can play center, right? Strong hand, so that you can win the draws on the correct side of the ice when you're on your strong side. I think that works out with Palmieri there, and Bailey is fine on that second line. Like I don't, I a capital F fine, like exasperated fine. He's good enough. Um, And then yeah, Holmstrom on the third line, that's safe for him to be there next to two veterans in Peugeot and Parise. I think that's a pretty good lineup. I don't think it's finished. There's something Holmstrom just isn't it right now. There's just that tenacity is just kind of missing. He did show was it not against Detroit. He had a sick toe drag goal right when the defenseman was right on top of him. It was an incredible release.
Yep.
If he could do that, and that was his third goal in like 20 something games, not great. Still young, a lot of opportunity. He just doesn't have that. Like Fashion came in and was just a bull in a china shop, and that's not Holmstrom's game. But that tenacity and that energy just wasn't there. This this team, if you're going to be playing in that bottom six, you really need to be able to turn it on sometimes and bring that energy in. I really haven't seen that from him. He's gotten opportunities up and down the lineup, whether out of necessity
Yeah.
or otherwise, based on the roster construction. He's gotten a lot of opportunity, and he kind of needs to show a little bit more, as far as I'm concerned, in that space. Um, any other thoughts on the deal itself? Giving up Ratu, how much that kind of like hurts long term, or do we not think about that? Do we kind of just have to, cross our fingers for an extension, then kind of just move on, like not belabor this as what did we lose, and are they going to be good, and a first round pick, and this and that? Uh, do we just move on, or is it something they just keep in the back of our head?
You can't think of it that way because the future wasn't looking great either way. And so the fact of the matter is that they were playing with house money, getting Aturatu in the second round, being able to move him for the player of Horvat's magnitude. I think that's just a good thing for the Islanders at this moment, right? Long term, yeah, it might be tough, but right now, it's just what needed to be done, in my opinion. And again, it's all about the extension, right? Like if the extension doesn't come through, that'll be detrimental. But the future wasn't looking good regardless. And I don't know. Maybe they're happy with some of their later round picks too, like this kid Matthew Maggio in the OHL right now. He's a fifth round pick, but he's leading the scoring for the league. He's a winger, and maybe they just like some of the other guys coming through the pipeline. But the thing is too, you look at the core of the Islanders, and they're all signed long term. Like Matthew Barzell's 8-year deal hasn't even started yet. So you're looking at these guys being on the roster for a while. Like these are the guys. This is the team for a while. And that's just the way that they're looking at it, is they have to add to what's going to be around for a long while. Pulak's going to be here. Pellick's going to be here. Pajot has how many more years? Is it 3 or 4? He's going to be here. Barzell for 8. Like this is the team. And now Horvat, I'd be willing to say he's going to get a 7, maybe an 8-year deal. What that looks like, we could talk about. But I also just learned through scrolling through the details of this trade. I didn't realize this until this very moment. Vancouver retained 25% of Bo Horvat's salary.
I saw that it's like kind of even it out with what Bavilier had.
Right. So, that just tells me even more that like Lou's not done. That's my hunch. He's not done. Like this is a move they made now to get themselves, to propel them a little further up in the standings if they can. And by the deadline, I'd be willing to bet that he's looking to add at least one more thing.
Yeah, I think depending on what other moves need to be made on the roster, just as far as like cap compliance and different things, I think they have Cap Fennelly has them at $2 million, a little over $2 million
Yeah.
in cap space. So it's enough. I'm not sure how deadline cap space totally works because that says closer to $9 million, and I know it's prorated and this and that. So somebody smarter than me could probably explain it, but um, given both or one of those numbers, it's enough to add a player towards a trade deadline. I think it really matters how they kind of come out in those games. The Islanders play Philadelphia and Seattle right after the break, and it's not the biggest test in the world, but it is a back to back. And then they play Vancouver on the 9th. Vancouver comes to the island that Thursday, and that's something. That's gonna be a big
Yeah.
game for Horvat, even though it's on the island. Um, that's a busy week. 4 games um in 5 days, right? And or six days. So and they don't have easy tests kind of the rest of the month. It's as you said, by the 15th or 16th, either that game against Ottawa or Pittsburgh, um, we'll know a little bit more. Hopefully, they're going on a run here. Hopefully, they even with the games in hand that they don't have that the other teams have on them, they can put something together here. Um, but it's a little more clear, at least that and something I wanted to ask Chris Botta that I didn't get a chance to is um, Lemro seems to believe in not the roster just this season, but he's doubling down kind of again on it. Like once you sign Horvat, if and when that happens, you're really constricting yourself. Like you're kind of there's not a lot of maneuvering you can do. Like you got at that point this offseason get rid of Bailey to be able to do anything. Forget about signing a backup goalie. Hopefully, I'm really hoping that's Varlamov at a cheaper deal at 2.5, for a few years or something. Because he's played really well this season. He's had a great bounce back season, but he's kind of committing to this a little bit more. Like we said, it's not that the window's open longer, but it's open a little bit wider. So what else are you going to do? How else are you going to improve this roster? Whether it's this trade deadline just to get into the playoffs and go maybe on a run or at least the first round, and then next season, like what are you going to do so when they step on the ice, they're better prepared in general than they were this season?
So as you were saying that, I'm thinking to myself, you're right. Now the thing is, you know, subtracting Bouvillier from the lineup is even though he didn't make a huge impact on the ice, is a huge impact on the team. You take him out and you add a Horvat, something completely different than what the Islanders have had before, right? Bouvillier is a little bit more of the mold of what they already have, right? A playmaking guy who has a little bit of speed and shows up on occasion, right? I know he's a shoot first guy, but he rarely scores, right? Now you're adding a guy who just that's all he does is score. And that the fact of the matter is that he's going to help take the pressure off of Barzell, so he's going to be a little bit more freed up to play. Teams are now going to be worried about and looking at Bo Horvat instead of Matthew Barzell, or maybe both of them together, and say to themselves, "Holy crap, what do we do? Like this is a duo that's really hard to contain."
And it opens up space for the rest of the team. Like
Correct.
Lee and
And
Nelson
that's
also are
my
going to have, less of a, defensive. The best defensemen and forwards
right.
are not
And
going to be out against them.
that's what I'm saying, right? The whole dynamic of the team has now changed. And so although, you know, Beauvillier didn't make a huge impact on in the lineup on a nightly basis, removing him and adding a Horvat changes the whole dynamic of the team. And now things are different now. In my opinion, now you can expect the offense to uptick a little further, and maybe that Lane Lambert style that he's been trying to implement, whilst also trying to keep that Barry Trotz defense intact. I think you're going to see a little bit more of that Lane Lambert system flourish a little bit more now. And the power play. Oh my God, the power play.
Oh, it has to. Anything could be better. They're at the bottom of the barrel as far as the power play. But I think if they can move the puck better too with Horvat, and I think it takes the pressure off Barzal it gives him some on the pass too. It gets him the puck more. Horvat can get him the puck or get him the puck back. Maybe it just helps the team get through the neutral zone a little bit better. Again, because Barzal doesn't need to carry the mail every single time to get his zone entry. You have somebody in Horvat that can presumably do that a little bit for you and kind of work their way into the system. I think it's also important to recognize, and we've said this before about some other players, it's taken them a while. That was to get into the system that the Islanders are playing. Given that the system has changed kind of considerably under Lambert, where it seems like there's a little bit less structure for the most part. They're still tough defensively. I think that's still how other teams view the Islanders. I don't know if that's left over and they're not really paying attention to the Islanders, because I certainly see a team that's a lot less structured, but that still seems to be the view of the team. But given that Lambert has a little bit more flexibility in his offense and kind of letting people have a little more rope, maybe it'll be easier for Horvat to kind of come into this team, as it maybe would have been harder under Trotz, just given how much of a team game it was. Maybe it'll be a little bit easier for them to kind of jump in here and make an impact right away. And they certainly need to. Like I said, back-to-backs, and then 2 more games in that week. And 4 games in a week is tough, especially with you're home, you're on the road, and then you're traveling. It's after a break against the Flyers, who I don't know what they're playing for, but they're maybe just trying to get blood at this point from other teams. But it doesn't make those games easy. You still have to go out there and produce, and it's something the Islanders have just struggled to do on a consistent basis this season. It just beat teams they should beat teams that are just better than on paper, and they've made a lot of mistakes. So hopefully this just gives them the injection that they need. It gives them a little energy. It gives them a boost. It's definitely a loss in the locker room without Beauvillier. It's a player that's been around the team for a very long time, but I don't know. I'm liking this the more that I think about it, and not that it's really all that hard to do, but I think it's going to help this team a whole hell of a lot moving forward. And fingers crossed they can get him signed and that they make the playoffs this year. Any closing thoughts before we get to the interview with Mr. Botta?
No, that's it. The interview was an exciting one. Definitely, something I think we mentioned it a little later too. It's never happened before where we've been able to talk about something that just happened on an episode. Usually we hit end and we're like, oh, we have to talk about it next week now because, we just missed it. But this one was in the stars for us, bud. So excited for you guys to listen to Chris's thoughts on this with us in a little bit. Nassibin Hockey is brought to you by DraftKings. NBA fans, it's time to bring the hoops action to the palm of your hands with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. This week, new customers can bet just $5 and win $200 in free bets instantly. Plus, for a limited time, all new and existing customers can get a no-sweat same-game parlay every day. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app today, opt in, and place a same-game parlay on any NBA game, and if it doesn't hit, you'll get a free bet back. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and sign up with code THPN. New customers can bet $5 on the NBA and get $200 in free bets instantly. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA with code THPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void in Ohio. See show notes for details. NASA in Hockey is also brought to you by Raycon. This time of year, everyone's talking about making big changes, which is all well and good, but most of the time, pretty unrealistic. For example, if you're an NHL team that's not making the playoffs but want to trade for a big player, why are you going to risk your future? However, I've actually found that the smallest changes to your routine can make the biggest impact. In the same way, you don't have to break the bank to make a big deal purchase. Even the smallest things can be part of a big change if it's something you use every day, like my Raycons. Raycon is premium audio at the perfect price point, so you can build great habits without breaking the bank. Now, whenever I'm cooking my meals, I wear my Raycons, and I have the noise cancellation so that when I'm trying to concentrate on my recipe, I can tune everything out. Whether you're looking for a pair of everyday earbuds, low latency gaming headphones, or a speaker with a battery that will last all night at your next party, Raycon's got you covered. And yep, you guessed it, Raycons start at half the price of other premium audio brands. So you don't have to choose between products. You can get one of each, or a pair and a spare, and still pay less than you would with other brands. Even if you know you'll love your Raycons as much as I do, Raycon wants to make sure you feel great about your purchase. They offer buy now, pay later options, and every purchase has an easy and free return guarantee. My favorite features on my Raycons are the noise isolation mode like I mentioned earlier, or the awareness mode when you can still listen to your audio and hear everything going on outside of the audio. So you ready to buy something small with a big impact? Go to buyraycon.com/THPN today to get 15% off your Raycon order. That's buyraycon.com/THPN to score 15% off. buyraycon.com/THPN.
We are very happy to welcome to the show co-host of Hockey Night in New York and longtime VP of Communications for the New York Islanders, and someone that James and I are a big fan of for very, very many years. Chris Botta, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. And thank you, James. Pleasure to be with the men of NASA.
I figure of all people, you would understand the name. Because when I had to pitch James on it back in the day, and I brought up that it was a Stan Fischlerism, because I had seen it in a number of his articles. I feel like of all people.
Oh, yeah.
You
Now
may.
you said I just had a flashback. Yeah, it's very... It's very Fischler-like to always come up with a different name for things, right? And so he would say the NASA man, yes, or the men of NASA, or he'd always have a different take, right? That's Stan.
Yeah, there was yeah, for real. It's somebody that's been around for almost all of it, pretty much all of it, and he's still going. It's kind of amazing. But
he was like my age when I got into the business, just to give that some context. Like pretty much that's the math. Like he was my current age when I was an intern for the Flyers and then went to work for the Islanders. So it's amazing, and he's a good man. He's in incredible shape. He rides his bike. He did at least ride his bike all over Manhattan in the parks there, and he's a special guy. I'm glad to see the Islanders honored him the way they did.
Yeah, and he's helped out a lot of people in media. I know a lot of people that we know, and a lot of people have been his interns. It's kind of that pathway and his connection just to like New York hockey in general, inside and outside of the New York Islanders. I know back in the day with a lot of like the blog box and different things, he was a huge reason why people were writers and learning and getting into the business. And then kind of even into today, there's a lot of people that have learned under the tutelage of Stan Fischler. So it's very, very, very cool.
He would do the when he worked on the Islander broadcast when I was there, he'd have they call them interns. They're called, a lot of places call them differently now. They were unpaid interns, kind of thing that probably doesn't fly anymore, but we're talking about back in the day. And he'd send over a list of 7 people to be his intern. To like, Stan, you're doing the pre-game and the post-game show. What do you need 7 people to go to the game with you for? But I could tell you, some of those people, and every once in a while when he has his reunions or another birthday as a party, and those people have gone on to be editors and publishers and broadcasters and in hockey and outside of hockey. So a lot of credit to him for that.
Well, Chris, you said that Stan was about your age when he started, so I'm hearing that he's not a day over 30.
Exactly. Neither am I. Amazing guy.
So we have some news to talk about that broke. I don't know. This is some kind of kismet here, where we were going to bring on a guest like you, Chris, who has a lot of very good opinions and thoughts and analysis, and we get to kind of have that pretty much in the moment. It's a little bit of an instant analysis. We're recording just before 8 o'clock, and the Bo Horvat trade. Um, Depending on the future of all these players involved, I suppose the name could change over time. But for now, for the Islander fans, it's the Bo Horvat trade. Um, Given the news, what do you think of it on its face without kind of thinking about the lines or what could be future value of somebody like Atu Ratu? What do you think of the trade for the New York Islanders?
Well, I would say it'd probably take about 90 minutes or more to, to discuss, but I'll try to summarize and we can go back and forth on it. For the record, I like this trade very much for the Islanders. I'm aware of the doomsday scenario. So, for example, let's go over it, right? It's Atu Ratu, it's Beauvillier, and it's a protected first round pick. If that pick is in one of the top 12, it slides to the next year. Doomsday scenario is it slides to the next year. The Islanders don't really get much better. Horvat, who's not signed to an extension, this deal was not done with any kind of contingency. You're already going to start to hear conspiracy theories that Lou already has a deal in place. Those conspiracy theories will not be true. That doesn't mean Bo won't sign with them. Bo Horvat, I should specify. I'm aware of all those things, but I do like the trade.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think what we've seen so far, just on Twitter and the presser with Bo Horvat, is that there have been the beginnings of that conversation, maybe happening now, but to this point, it hasn't. No conversation has started yet between
Yeah,
agent.
no, listen, for the record, Bo Horvat himself said there haven't been any conversations and there's no reason for him to say otherwise. So when I said that I like the trade, the only reason I put a period on the end of it is I didn't want to talk for 18 minutes straight, right? Because this trade is so intriguing on so many levels. Like I get there's people who are angry about it from the Islanders' perspective. A lot of people angry about it from the Canucks' perspective. People are going to be hesitant to say what they think of this trade because there's so many things that we don't know about, right? How does Atu pan out? Do the Islanders get Horvat signed long term? The reason why I like it, and I just want to say this, and I know it's somewhat non-traditional, is although I'm aware of that doomsday scenario, he doesn't sign, and the pick is a high pick next year or whatever. I'm a big believer in if you make a trade like this and it doesn't work out perfectly, it shouldn't doom a franchise. And listen, how many times for how many years did we hear, well, Boston eventually is not going to be any good, and now they've for the last 3 games notwithstanding, they've torn up the league. For how many years have we heard that the Tampa Bay Lightning, well, sooner or later they're going to run out of cap space? And whether you want to consider some of their moves a scam or a clever use of the system, they somehow find a way. So I don't lose sleep, and a hockey team or an executive like Lou Lamoriello should not lose sleep over anything, and nor would he if something doesn't work out perfectly. I feel, guys, that this is a team, and I'm well aware of the standings, this is a team that needed a change.
Yeah.
It almost got to the point, John and James, where you can make the case that it needed to make a trade for the sake of making a trade, which I know the ultimate cliche is you don't do that. But this is a stale team. This is a team that got stale. The last 2 victories, it was nice. They were at home. Everybody went home happy. They got the 4 points. But let's not get too crazy about those 2 victories, right? So what did they need? They needed a player exactly like Bo Horvat. And for that, they did the right thing. I think if you and I did this show, you and the 2 guys did this show 3 weeks ago, and we said, what would Bo Horvat cost? I think almost to the letter, we would have said a first round pick, Ratu, and probably somebody like Beauvillier, because the Islanders are going to want to lose some money, and the Canucks might like him, might like Beauvillier. So this is where we are, and I do applaud Lou Lamoriello and the staff for making it. I'm sure they're aware very much of what they've given up in Ratu. But one thing that I have said since I started getting into podcasts, among the many lessons that I learned from working for a team, and I know there's some easy jokes in there about Mike Milbury or other people I might have worked with, right? But I learned from all of it, the good and the bad. And one of the things you learn that I saw with the Islanders and other teams is when you trade a player like Ratu, nobody knows more of what they're giving up than the Islanders do. They drafted him, by the way, somewhat of a steal, because now they've maximized that value. He was a second-round pick. Now he's the centerpiece in the trade for probably one of the most prized guys in Horvat, not the most prized guys in Horvat at the trade deadline. So that's pretty good too. So I think they have a pretty good feel for Ratu. Is by no means am I saying that the Islanders are sitting around saying this is a steal. We know Ratu isn't that good. I think they know exactly what they've given up, and what they've given up is fair value. So, I like when Garth Snow called me down 137 years ago. Actually, it's 16 years ago now. To say I made a trade. What is it, Snowy? I got Ryan Smith. What'd you give up, Snowy? Ryan O'Mara, Nilsson, and a first-round pick. I was like, good for you, man. And Ryan O'Mara and Robert Nielsen, sorry, I forgot your first name, Robert, are not the player that Ratu is. So I like tries. I like shaking things up. I understand where they are in the standings. They need a player like Horvat, not just for this year, so what beyond. They seem to believe that by bringing him to UBS, bringing him to Long Island and New York, that Horvat's going to like it here. So I'm not, I'm aware of how it could go badly, but I got nothing bad to say about this trade. I like the attempt. I like the spirit behind it. And let's face it, Huda is not excited to see them play next week. Whereas I don't know if an hour and a half ago we were that excited to see them play. That does count for something. So I applaud it across the board.
Yeah, Chris, I'm with you here. I think that's very well said, everything you said there. And I'm a stats guy, and everybody's sitting here saying, look at what they gave up. I shouldn't say everybody, but the naysayers of this trade are sitting here saying, look at what they gave up. A young guy in Beauvillier, our top prospect in Ratu, and, a first-round draft pick. And I could understand all of that. However, in this deal, there's 2/3 of an unknown going to Vancouver, right? We don't really know what Ratu is going to turn out to be. And we don't know what that draft pick is going to look like once it is the selection is made. So Beauvillier is going the other way. I feel like he personally needed a bit of a different scene for, him to maybe elevate his game a little bit, or, maybe he'll just be the same player for Vancouver. Who knows? But I like to look at what the Islanders got, and in the numbers, right? He's a 31 goal scorer to this point through 49 games. And over an 82 game span, Horvat is projected to score 52 goals. I don't even know that the Islanders have had a 40 goal scorer in the last 5 years, right? Anders Lee did it in 2017-18, if that's correct. So automatically they're getting a 40 goal scorer. I'm sure he's going to score 9 by the end of the season. And then I look at the Islanders power play in the last month, 2 for 31. That's detrimental. And he has 11 power play goals so far this season. So he's a goal scorer through and through, something the Islanders just don't have or didn't have until this point. And now they are finally getting that. So I'm with you, Chris. Everything you said was well said. I like to put the numbers to it. And it's just everything that he's bringing is what they already didn't have.
Yeah. Listen, I think they do. The only thing we can't talk about numbers that don't exist. I think Ratu in Vancouver has the potential to be really, really good for them. So you hope that this works out for everyone, right? I'm sure that is the goal. It is funny. It's one of those trades where probably 60% of the fans, maybe even for both teams, like aren't currently happy about it, but then they'll see Ratu. Let's keep in mind that talking about numbers, that Horvat is having the ultimate career year at the best time and on a complete disaster of a franchise season, a team, right? Like the Canucks are this season have been as dysfunctional, well, close to as dysfunctional as some of the seasons that I worked with the Islanders, right? Like the Jim Rutherford stuff, the coaching change, the treatment of coach, everything. So he somehow, Horvat, this is, has managed to excel despite that. The way I would look at it is that even if he doesn't keep up this season's torrid pace and is somewhere between the middle, right? What he's done in the past, which is kind of a 25 goal, 50, 60 point guy, and what he's doing this year, you would still sign up for that. And the other part is this is a guy, you can cross-check this on me, but I got a text, I reached out to a few people to help also educate me. And before I came on, so I try to go to people smarter than me. And somebody who works in this business on the hockey side, he pointed out that I'm just looking for the note here. There, one second. That Horvat has taken the second most faceoffs this season in the NHL. He's taken them. That means that his team relies on him. And I understand Vancouver sucks and everything this year, but you don't send the guy out there if he's not good. So he's a guy who will be able to take pressure off Barzal in a lot of ways. Brings a lot to the table. And then lastly, not a stats thing, but one thing that I've heard consistently before he was traded to the Islanders, and certainly in the last hour, is that people love this guy's leadership, character, all that stuff. Now, that can be overrated sometimes, but when everybody's telling you like all those things, the effort, everything else is at an elite level, and he's producing, he has skill, he has talent, that counts for a lot too. So these are all reasons why I like it. He's also, this trade wasn't made at the deadline with the Islanders 2 points out and a glut of a bunch of not so great teams trying to get a final playoff spot. It was made a full month before, even if you throw out this week, about 4 weeks. There's a lot of games to be played. The Islanders are a better team today. They'll be a better team when they play Philadelphia on Monday. That doesn't always count for much. Some people, I should say, told me, well, they're better because they don't have Chara and Green anymore, and they got Romanov. Well, big deal. Like, I mean, so what? What does that mean? But they are a better team. They're a more interesting team. I like it, and it's not a trade that I'm going to second guess, no matter how it pans out. It does remind me of the Ryan Smith trade in that I appreciate the spirit and the intent behind it. And if it doesn't work out, I'll say one more time, an executive leadership, in this case with Lamoriello, Chris Lamoriello, if they're going to be here, none of them should be so inept that they can't recover if this doesn't work out perfectly for them.
It's definitely an uphill battle. Lamoriello has struggled in his time on Long Island anyway in the offseason. This is not a weird move, right? Romanov trade aside, the trade deadline thereabouts, this is about the time Peugeot was traded for. Maybe it was a little bit later in February, maybe mid-February. So this isn't the move. This isn't this crazy move. I think this is his biggest one, although Palmieri at that time was the prime target going into that trade deadline. So he has a history of kind of doing this. And even if Islander fans don't have all the faith in the world in Lamoriello, given ups and downs and kind of twists and turns, and the clear need for this trade to have happened arguably 3 years ago, it finally does kind of come to fruition. And you talked about Horvat as a center who's taking a lot of draws at somewhere that Barzal's also struggled with. Do you think that this particular trade, or going for a player that plays this position, was kind of a couple layers deep? Like, it's definitely a player that can score, and it takes pressure off Barzal in a lot of ways. And this is definitely a leadership kind of player like that Lou likes to get. It makes a lot of sense here. Again, to your point, does it take even do we even understand the magnitude of the load that it takes off Barzell at this point? And do you think he just plays a little bit more freely moving forward? Do we just see a player that is skating lighter out there?
He should. That's the bet. The way these things work is that, and I think I'll try to paint the picture of what I think the last couple of weeks were like of the Islanders, right? Basing it on my time around teams in that office, and also around other teams and other coaches and GMs, right? So my educated guess is that in the last few weeks, it's not just Lou by himself, right? It's the people around him. It's Ken Morrow and Eric Cairns and the scouts, but also the coaching staff, all the coaches, perhaps even the Bridgeport coach. And they're trying, if you were going to identify the kind of player or the player that you would want. So one example of this, right, is I was around the team a lot the crazy weekend that they got a Coin, Pekka, and Yashin, among others, 20 years ago, right? But Peter Laviolette, who we had hired, he was there, and they have their board up, and they're talking about, well, what we all know they're no different than us as the fans. We might have his fun and talk about how much great spirit we are. They're not acting really much differently. They're sitting there going, what do we need? And I think it's fair speculation to say that Bo Horvat was their target. He was their number one guy. Might be number two, number three. But he fits the description, and he's available. By the way, they're not putting Connor McDavid on the board, right? Like, they're putting people on the board to talk about, to debate guys who could be available. So they're looking at the Coyotes, they're looking at the Canucks, and so there's no question that Lane Lambert weighs in. Okay, well, if we got Bo Horvat, what would you do with him? Ken Morrow, and forgive me, a lot of the other scouts too, I'm sure weighed into it. Ken's a guy I've known a long time. What do you think? And so there's that. And then it's like, okay, well, what are we willing to give up? And my guess is, especially since this trade was made before the All-Star game, and I don't think, the Canucks have had a dysfunctional season, and now their guy who was going to wear their laundry for the All-Star game is now not on their team anymore. So what that says to me is that Lou Lamoriello at some point told his friend Jim Rutherford, we need to make this trade by Tuesday, let's say tomorrow, or deals off and I got to shop elsewhere. But I want to get him in town. I want to give him those few days. I believe Bo Horvat's he's in Disneyland with his family right now. Give him some time to move over. So I think the Islanders called their shot here. They targeted a player or two or three. Horvat was number one. They knew they'd have to give up Ratu in that deal. By the way, it's a trade that had been speculated as well, and then they knew that it would hurt, that they would bleed a little bit for this trade. They're not thrilled; they would love to do this trade without Ratu, but that's the cost, and they accepted that. And it was just a matter of Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin calling them and saying it's a deal. It appears that this afternoon he called them and said it's a deal. So that's why I like it, because they went after somebody they wanted. They knew what they wanted. They knew they'd pay a price for it. They put in, which seems to me like common sense, to protect themselves in case players got hurt and that pick wound up being top 7 or they were in the lottery, because that's a nightmare if you lose out on Bedard, for example. So they did the right things. So long-winded way of answering your question that, this is with a purpose. This is Barzal. This is an answer to all the people who said, what are they going to do to help Matthew Barzal? Getting Bo Horvat is probably you can make the case that within this season is the best you could possibly do. We can't look back on guys that missed out on free agency or guys who didn't resign or whatever. in terms of the people that were available, Horvat is the best player on film, on paper, in real life, everything. So they went out and got
Arguably,
him.
this
Yeah,
is
it
a
could help.
better pickup than a Kadri or a Goudreau, given their age, and given how
Yeah, the
JT
difference
Miller's
being
season
the
has
time.
gone. Yeah, and then given how JT Miller's season has gone so far, and his general attitude around the team, and that's not very Lemero like either. So this has a things have a way of working themselves out as far as getting your guy. Fingers crossed that he actually signs, and then the team can retool, right? James and I have been very careful about this isn't going to be like the Rangers sending out a letter and saying we're going to rebuild, or I forget the nuance of that, but they were committing to something and not being good for a year. And they did okay, and then kind of going back into it. That's not necessarily what is going on here, which begs the question, does Bo Horvat open the Islanders window any longer, right? Given the age of the team and some contracts that are going to come due, with the way that the dollars and cents of it are going to shake out. Sorokin after next season, Bavillier's gone, so you don't have to worry about that deal. Bailey eventually comes off the books after this, after next season. So there's some stuff there, but what are your thoughts on that? How do they proceed?
When you first asked it 30 seconds ago, my immediate thought was, is it just too weak to say, can we revisit that question in about 4 weeks? I mean, that's a bold thing to say that one player. And again, prior to this year, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, James might have a view on this. Like, I don't think people saw Bo Horvat as a franchise changer. That said, as you guys have said repeatedly, he's young. He's just entering his prime. So maybe what he's done this year is what he's capable of the next few years. And just to be fair, I think a year ago, the idea of that, or even giving up with the Islanders did. But that happens. Things change. I mean, guys all of a sudden figure it out. And he's figured it out in a very tough situation over there with Boudreaux and Rutherford and everything that's gone on with that franchise. So I just, it's I'm on record as saying I like this move, and I'm going to always like it no matter how it pans out. On January 30th, as we record this, can I say that he keeps that window, pushes that window open a little further for this group? I just can't say that right now. You never really, as fans and observers, we can't really appreciate somebody's intent. The things that we're hearing about Horvat, about those intangibles and the leadership. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I don't get to see that, or I'm not smart enough to see it when I watch the Canucks play 6 games in the season, right? We'll see him. We'll see the effort. After they play Philadelphia, they play Seattle at home the next night. And like, 2 hours ago, the Islanders would not be the favorite in that game, right? Bo Horvat should make that a pick'em game. By the way, and I think your guys, if I see DraftKings as a sponsor, I'm not here to turn this into a gambling operation. But it now sucks if they lose those games, especially that home game to Seattle. Right now, the way the Islanders have been playing, including this weekend, the same team that the Islanders showed against Vegas, especially in the second half of that game, played this year's Seattle Kraken, you're going to get the doors blown off. So does that all change with Horvat's skill, character, everything that he brings, goal scoring ability, power play ability, face-off ability? Yeah, it should. It better. I just can't, I think it's a great question that you asked. I think that's a question that you ask me or who's ever your guest on the show in 4 weeks, when hopefully he's been re-signed or he's been signed to a new deal, and we have a little bit more of a taste of what he's got. Leadership can be a little funny. We got Trevor Linden when I was there. Again, I get it. I know these things are 25 years old. I've become Stan Fischler, right? Trevor was just the greatest guy. And he brought that same leadership ability, but I don't know if the high skill level was there by the time he came. and he was okay for us. He'd be the first to tell you, and he wound up going back to Vancouver and via Montreal, if I recall. So that kind of stuff you never know. But I just come back to the fact that, and I know fans might say, Timo Meier, if they were going to get really in the weeds on this, and I suspect Timo Meier was on the Islanders board, I just think Horvat was the guy, and they got him, and the price wasn't super excessive. I like it from Vancouver's standpoint too. It's great that the Islanders gave up the Beauvillier contract. I don't think they're going to miss that. That said, I think Beauvillier can help them and be a good player for them, and I think we'd all be rooting for him. He's a good dude. And Ratu's Ratu. So this is one of the most fascinating trades that not only the Islanders made, but an NHL team has made in recent, because they're not second in the conference. It's because of where they are. That really just adds another layer to this. So let's give that game changer, window opener, wide opener thing. I just feel like we got to give that a couple of weeks in fairness.
I think that's fair. And, just to kind of now turn the attention to just this season, and like you said, there's 4 weeks until the trade deadline. My question's kind of twofold here, just because I haven't really been able to let this digest yet either. Are the Islanders done by the time they get to the trade deadline? Because the way I see it is one of two things. If they feel like they can, whether it's a big or a small thing, add a little bit more to this group, if they're closer to, or in better position for the playoffs by the trade deadline, do they have the ability to add more? If not, and if no extension has been placed yet for Horvat by the time the deadline comes, can they flip him?
Yeah. So on the first part, my guess would be that they will be listeners. So to answer your question, I don't think they're done. And I think the position that they are in now is that they are listeners. In other words, they are listeners to the Boston Bruins if they want to come calling for Scott Mayfield, because the Bruins have identified Scott as like the guy to give them that extra depth on D, to lock them in and increase their stance as a contender, as a legit, a leading Stanley Cup contender. They listen to Team X, Y, and Z, you name them, on Varlamov, because again, if you can make your team better, it's a dice roll. I get it, but that's always been the thing. Most of the teams in this league have one goalie you hope is great, and then the backup. The Islanders have this luxury, and it served them well. But if you got an offer that you like for Varlamov, I don't know if you could turn that down. So I don't know. They don't have much else to sell. Getting a call from a guy I worked with for 20 years at the Islanders. See how this spurs up? It's not somebody I hear from regularly. He must be calling me about this trade. I wouldn't think they're done, but right now it's too early to tell. As for this idea of flipping, that's a bad look, right? That would mean the only way he gets flipped is if the team continues to go down. And that on that date, which is around March 1st, that they are now comfortably out, or just feel like, what's the point of this? I don't think they're thinking that way at all. I know everything coming out of the Island is that they have every intention of signing them. A flip, and I know the guy at The Athletic couldn't resist somebody, not Kevin, by the way, the guy, I don't know his name, couldn't resist being a wise ass and saying something like, "Oh, think of what they can get from when they flip." Dom, that's what Dom does, and hey, God bless, working out for him. I just that's really really tough to envision, because then what would you like? You're not going to get more. It would be at most it'd be a level move. So again, when I say this is one of the most intriguing deals done in a long time, that is one of the reasons. That is a scenario that does exist. He's not, and
So
until he's signed, he's not signed, and he's not signed, and there's no
Right.
reason for the agent Pat Morris, who's been at this a long time, and Lou Lamoriello, who's been at this a long time, to be cute about it. So we just let's, as we often say in PR, and lately we've been saying on our podcast, hope is not a strategy. Just thinking that, well, how could they not do this without having Horvat signed? Well, they did. They did do this without Horvat being signed. So we can't forget that.
Should we anticipate them having that deal done by the deadline, or is this something that could carry to the summer?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't. So good question. Let me think about this. Right, like I think before the trade deadline, if you're Lou Lamoriello, even if the deal's not done, you have to be comfortable with where it's headed. Right.
Right.
The reason why Bo Horvat was on the block, and Jim Rutherford like completely messed up the Bruce Boudreau thing, but Jim Rutherford prior to this has been known. I mean, Larry Brooks loves Jim Rutherford. He calls him Gentleman Jim. Lou Lamoriello, everybody loves Jim Rutherford because he's an honest guy and a guy of integrity. And Rutherford came out when it came to Bo Horvat and said that, we wanted to keep him, but he's looking for money based just on this year alone. So he telegraphed it. He was honest. He said, he set up his fans, he prepared his fans for this kind of a trade. So if you're Lou, you want to feel really comfortable before the deadline. I guess that the scenario for him being flipped, and I would just say being just traded again, would be the Islanders struggling, and wow, they're just in different ballparks on the deal, on the measure of the deal. If I had to guess right now, and this is purely a guess, it would be that they are going to sign him, but nothing's agreed to right now. But there is, to answer your question, just like technically, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be done by the deadline.
Right.
You don't want it to go to the summer. It would have to be, toward the end of the season. But he was acquired with the idea that this is a piece. When we got Ryan Smith, Garth was under no illusions. He knew that re-signing this Captain Canada type would be difficult. But he wanted to give the team a chance, and he figured what he was giving up made it worth that chance, and that Ryan could help in the 2007 playoffs. In this case, it's a little bit different. Horvat has been acquired with the idea that he'd be one of the pieces that everybody knows this team is missing.
So I think, like you said, one of those pieces that this team is missing, and this is going off of, and I hate to ask. The biggest piece, absolutely. And I don't want to ask the same question, but this is close, but slightly different. Is the team Bo Horvat away from being a real contender, or is this simply it's going to help them make the playoffs? If they do, this will be a reason. And then moving forward, there's still some additions. There's still some work to do to this roster to make them even Eastern Conference finalists again.
Well, I know this might sound funny after talking for the better part of 36 minutes by reminding everybody, as I do from time to time on the podcast, that I'm not an analyst. I'm not Butchie, right? I'm not Danico. I'm not Billy Jaffe. I'm not. So all that aside, I think the easy answer to your question is no, Bo Horvat doesn't make them a Stanley Cup. The team that's played this season, all season, not just the last 6 weeks. If you add Bo Horvat, he makes them a better team. I don't think I would think most people would not say he doesn't make them a team. And I know that then leads to the question of, so then why do the deal? If he's re-signed, it, as you would say, kind of reopens that. It gives them more hope. It does add that piece and the opportunity to then take the off season to continue to build on it. See, I thought the goal of, the reason why a couple weeks ago, when they were losing every game, I was saying, fans, you don't now just sell because that just doesn't work that way when you're 3-4 points out of a playoff spot. I know there's teams behind them, and I know the game's in hand, and this isn't going to be easy, right? But you do this at this point, you do this to get into the playoffs. And then one of the reasons that I cited was, again, for the 1-4, because you got a goalie who could win series for you, right? And he could beat Boston in a series. He's that good. Those are all moments that could happen. Now, one of the things I thought was, well, one of the reasons you get in is to give Aatu Ratu playoff experience and Holmstrom and Bolduc and people like that. Obviously, that's not going to affect Aatu Ratu almost certain. Well, he will not be playing in the playoffs this year. So I don't think just to flat out answer your question, I don't think he makes them a contender this year. He does make them a much better team and re-sign. He makes them a better team for the future and another piece that they can build upon.
Yeah, and I mean, even just for this year, thinking about internal ads, they did just get Palmieri back, and he looks energized. He looked okay in those last few games.
Very
In his
good.
first game back against Toronto, he was a man on a mission, and it was great. And you also got Pelech back, who was gone for longer than people think, or maybe it's exactly as long as people think, because it was a very long January
Yeah.
until he returned, and the better part of December, if I'm not mistaken. So they've done some internal additions just by the the very nature of players come back from injury. So adding Horvat could really it'll change the construction of the roster for sure, not just that first line. It makes them much more formidable, and it may, at the very least, open the door for the rest of the team, a Nelson or a Lee, who are both leading the team in goals scored. For the Islanders anyway, not just in general. That's Bo Horvat. To give them a little more space, the other teams have to concentrate on that line now. Granted, we think they're going to play together, so I think as a roster, I'm interested to see what comes out on the other side. Any thoughts on, like, obviously it's Barzal and Bo Horvat. Who's playing alongside them? Ratu is playing the fourth line for Zika. Zika's playing well on that first line. What does some of that look like? We don't have a Wallstrom back yet. Fingers crossed, maybe he's closer than we think. We haven't really heard a whole lot.
It doesn't seem that way based on the reports from Andrew and Kevin. Listen, I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is that at some point, Lou and Lane were talking, and there's a board either in the office they were talking in, or remotely, or however. I don't know if Lane went away or he took some time off, and there's a name next to those people. Whose name that is, I'm not too sure. Maybe it's a buzzsaw again, like a Parisi. I don't know. The one last thing that I alluded to maybe just at the beginning, when I said about this kind of trade for the sake of making a trade, and this is another level to that, right? This is a massive, big time. This is a blockbuster trade in the NHL. But the other thing that I just love about this is, like, this is a very undata-like thing, right? Or scouting-like comment. But there's something to be said for a change, for an injection, right? Of enthusiasm, of a guy who's coming from a place where it was crazy town in Vancouver. They're usually not, but it was this crazy town. This kind of little switch for the Islander franchise, right? He's coming to a place that's actually normal. Like, it's been a tough season, and last year was a disaster with COVID and everything that's happened. But this is a functional franchise. This is a well-run, well-owned franchise. And the same guys were coming to work every day, and they were losing those games, the last two games notwithstanding. And it's Bo, and it's Barzal, and it's Lee, and it's the same. And now a light guy in Anthony Beauvillier, he's gone. And they're going to miss him, including Barzal, apparently besties, right? Or right up there. They're each other's close friends. And he's going to be missed. And it's a reminder, like, they don't all get to do this forever. And the Islanders have kind of been this way with this group, right? A couple guys have come and gone, had to be traded for cap reasons or whatever. But, like, this has been the same group for a long time. And now it isn't. And a prospect who they barely knew is gone. and a player who was liked, but just somehow wasn't getting to the next level. He's a third line guy who was never looking like a second. Some big goals now in their history, and he'll be cheered loudly, I'm sure, when he comes back. But now, like, the whole thing's changed just by two guys being gone and this one all-star this season player coming in. And that's exciting. And that should have, just like a coach, you ever notice a coaching change team always does well for a while. Like, this should change this team in a lot of ways, and you would expect it would be in very positive ways, which is one of the 7 or 8 reasons why I love it.
I think that's a really good place to stop that part of the conversation. But I do want to touch on one last thing before we hit that magic 45-minute mark here. The kind of how this conversation started and kind of why we're on the show is because I had responded to something about 7:30 starts for the Islanders, and your kind of inside knowledge of some of that stuff is very interesting. I think the ins and outs of the game. One of these days, I'm sure you'll write an amazing book if it's not already started, especially on the early 2000s stuff. Which, if you can't see, this is the flag of all a bunch of signed players from that time. When they used to, and I'm sure you organized this. The players used to come to Computer Associates, and my mom would say, "These are the players. This is and I would give them all my cards and different Islanders paraphernalia, and she would go get everything signed for me."
That's amazing.
Yeah, I had that. That's like all early 2000s. So that's like formative years for me is during that time. So our connection grows a little bit there. But your knowledge and that it was amazing. Like that whole era was so much fun, I think, as a kid. And then later on they weren't so great, but when I was in high school they were such cheap tickets. You can go to 10 games a season for $14 a piece. So for whatever that's worth. But I think a lot of fans are they were questioning the 7:30 starts. How does that happen? Like,
the biggest issue the biggest issue at that time, and it's so nice to have a hockey trade to talk about instead, right? Was the fact that the bigger thing was, so the 7:30 thing. It's people say it's for TV. Well, it's not for TV because the Rangers play most of their games at 7, and they're on MSG. It's not a TV thing. It seems to be just something that Lou Lamoriello prefers, and I do think the 7:30 does make sense for people to get to UBS, right? I work in the city just one day a week, having a little more time to get to UBS if I'm going that route. It's a lot easier than if the game's at 7. So, and there was one game at 7 o'clock on this past Friday because it was on ESPN, and they insist on it, and the others can't do anything about it. The big question at the time, where I then responded to you and said I couldn't answer in a tweet, but I'd be happy to talk about it, and so we talked about acquiring Bo Horvat. Amazing. Was they only had one day game. And they only have one matinee game, and it was on a Saturday. And you and other people asked the question, like, doesn't the league tell them the schedule? And to just give you the short version is the teams have a lot of say in their schedule. They by the way, that process for next season is probably already started. In fact, it almost certainly is already started. The Islanders in this case give up dates that are available. They are at a great advantage with UBS because there isn't an NBA team. There might be some holds for the Eagles coming back one more time, and maybe Springsteen coming around again, in next March or whatever it might be, and other dates too, hipper acts than the two old bands that I just named.
The Rolling Stones, surely one more time.
But yes, I could name others. So the team does have a lot to say. My only point in this is that if there's only one game at 12:30, the entire season, only one matinee game, which does, families, if they want to go with really young children, you think they'd maybe have a couple more. We used to, as you know, when you were younger, we used to have more, 5, 6, 7, whatever it might be. All I can say is, like, that's by design. Like, the Islanders want it that way. Now, who and why, I don't know. Like, only they could answer that. Some fan theories out there that they suck in day games. I can't. I would sure as hell hope that that's not the reason, because what would that say about your sports team, right? What these guys are tough. They're world class. They're elite. We can't possibly overmanage us to the fact where, oh, we were 2-7 and I just can't buy that. It would seem to me that the team, for whatever reason, has their reasons. I don't really buy some people say, well, you can't sell as many Heinekens. In day games, I wouldn't underestimate, maybe James can back me up here, I wouldn't underestimate Islander fans' ability to consume beers, literally all day and then for hours after their day game. So I don't see that as the reason. But my answer to your thing is the Islanders have a lot of say in their schedule. They have a big advantage in their schedule, the fact that they don't travel as much and they kind of run their building and don't have an NBA team that plays there taking up 41 dates. And yet it still nets out to this. Why that is, the Islanders have not said. I don't expect that they will say, but they have their reasons for it. If they didn't acquire Bo Horvat today, we would talk about this for 30 minutes. But I'm just giving you the short version.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is, if I would have drawn it up 2 weeks ago, I was like, oh, it's the All-Star break. We'll get like a nice little conversation going on about where the team is and
real ratings.
Can they recover? Yeah, well, something in between, when it's interesting, and I'm sure if you ask Sean or anyone else in the podcasting world, it's when there's nothing going on, Islander fans are so hungry for a conversation. And we learned that over the summer. We keep going. We're like one of the rare shows. We'll just keep going throughout the summer, and people are just dying for something. I hope, we have people follow along. So people are listening. I hope we're providing them with enough information, but we'll have to book you for like the time you were with the teams will go by the decade, and maybe
we can talk more about the minutia and not the stuff. But that happened with Sean is, Sean does the thing. He's kind of married to this in studio Sunday night thing. So there isn't a lot of flexibility. When I started doing it was amazing at the beginning of the season, just quickly. I said, buddy, I'm happy to do it this way, but also competitive, right? I want to bring eyeballs and listeners, as I'm sure you're growing your show, doing so well as well. And I just said, we need to have the maneuverability so that if something does happen, right? Like we need to just plug in and do a show. And he's like, oh, of course, Chris, if we have to on 11 o'clock at night somewhere. And then like 3 days later, they signed Barzal to the long-term contract extension. And I'm texting him and I'm saying, I think I can get Ferraro. He knows Barzal from the West. And he's like, all right, come on over. So we haven't done many of those, but sometimes those moments happen. And it's great because, we don't have, they're not talking on the Boomer and Carton show on the Michael K. They're not talking about the Bo Horvat trade tomorrow. They're not. They might bring it up in passing, but they're not. This is what these shows are for.
Yeah, that's the advantage of the podcast world. There's us, there's Hockey Night, there's the Islanders Anxiety, and there's a few other shows that can do this on a, and James and I try to do our best to make sure the breaking news is in there. We try not to go in and do a show on a game day, or the best we can. But we've worked it out over the. I think, are we coming up on 3 years? That's a little crazy. But it's been a long time. Yeah, February must be 3 years. But it's interesting how the news part of it works out, and listening to enough shows, eventually you just stop caring, and we'll get it on the next one. If you got to do 2 shows in a week and you schedule, you find another time to talk about whatever you're going to talk about. I listen to enough.
Although I will say this is, I think, the first time news has broke and we didn't just hit end recording.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is the first time.
when I did my hockey press pass thing last year, which was kind of more media driven, writers and broadcasters talking about their stuff, but we did do some Islander stuff because that's the team that I work for. And I finished the show and it was late. We would record like them in blocks, and it was like 11 o'clock at night. And I got a text from a friend saying, "Oh, did you see they signed Pellick to a long-term extension?" Like the news broke like somewhere at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, well, we got to do something on that. So, hey, it's exciting. It's really kind of amazing how it turned out. I understand you probably could have had a better guest, but maybe in the next show you could have somebody break down Bo Horvat even more. So,
No, this is really. We've enjoyed you on Hockey Night. You know, we watch the clips, and I watch on YouTube during work. I'm not occasionally anyway. While I'm not too distracted as a writer, uh, whatever. I usually have like peaceful piano music, but every once in a while I can throw on a hockey podcast and just have it kind of go in the background. So I watch Hockey Night on, and I love the graphics. You know, like I said earlier off
yeah, he
air,
does a
it's a
nice
very
job.
well produced show, and you know, we definitely a lot of a lot of respect for what they've like over a number of years, right? This isn't just with this show; they've done a lot
Yeah,
before
he's
this.
done it for a
But
while.
we won't take up too much more of your time. Although I'm sure after we hit end record, we'll have plenty to talk about. But we won't take too much of your time on the air. We appreciate you coming on and breaking this down. This is a wonderful guest and analysis. I know you said you weren't an analyst, but it works, and you know, I think we learned a lot. It's very good perspective. So we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, I try to bring. That's the only thing I can do is bring the perspective from being around it, and this is why I like it. And congrats to Lou. And listen, like your show, you got a lot to talk about these next few weeks. Yeah, it looks like they were
Absolutely.
going to be kind of. They might. We don't know if they're going to stay stuck in the middle, but there's a storyline now, right? I'm a theater guy, right? There is every game now. It was important then. Now it's important with this added juice of they added a star player to the lineup and didn't take away that much short term. They didn't take away that much from it. So you guys got a lot to talk about in the next few weeks.
Absolutely. Thanks again. We'll make sure to reconnect in the summer or something. We have each other's information. We'll make something happen later on.
Yeah, my pleasure, John. Anytime, reach out. Thanks, James. Great saying hello.
Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate you coming on with us.
Take care, guys.
Thank you again to Chris Botta for joining us on the show. Um, Great insight and definitely a little bit of I don't want to say starstruck, but when I was first starting to write, he was still doing Point Blank, I believe. I was on the checking line, if anyone remembers that. Um, and then with Eyes on Isles, this is 2012, 13-ish kind of thing. And yeah, it was definitely somebody that I think a lot of people looked up to, and it was kind of crazy to talk to him. He's just somebody that you just see from afar a little bit, and we've had the opportunity to do that with a number of people, and he's definitely somebody kind of on our radar for a long time. What do you think of the general discussion and some of his thoughts?
He articulates himself very well. He has very fair takes on the whole situation. And I agreed with his take in this was a deal that needed to happen, right? The Islanders are largely built to win now, and this was a move that Lamoriello needed to make. So, yeah, all very well articulated by Chris. I couldn't have said anything he said better myself. So I'm just, we're so used to seeing Lamoriello needs to do this, Lamoriello needs to do that, but will he? Sleepy Lou, yada yada. And this is like the first time we get to talk about in a while, at least. Well, he done did the thing, and this is the thing that we all have been asking for. So here it is.
Yeah, I almost want to sleep on it a little bit. There's all like, we're doing an instant reaction too. We had kind of planned to do this show this week. As we kind of teased last week, we're inviting Chris on the show to during the All-Star break, and we wanted to get his analysis kind of like where the team was, where it's going. They seemed, even despite the back-to-back wins, it seemed really lost. They seemed really lost rather, and they played a hell of a game against Vegas. So it set a little bit of different tone and started putting notes together and questions. And then, yeah, a little while before we were set to record with Chris, this news break. So it kind of changed things, but I think it changed the tone for the Islanders, the entire fan base and the franchise. I'm not saying it's like a franchise changing move, but at least change the mood around the team. There's
Yeah.
something else here now, and that's good. They have some work to do. They need to go win some hockey games and start to gel as quickly as possible. Um, But yes, definitely enjoyed having Chris on there. He was responsible for a lot of stuff around the Islanders in my formative years. So it was very cool to have a chance to talk to him, and hopefully we get to have him on again in the summer when we have a little bit more time. I'd love to hear some stories about his time working on the Islanders. And he did drop a Garth Snow story, which
He
is
did.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely want to hear more about that stuff, even if it doesn't all make it to air and in the final product. Selfishly, I just kind of want to be involved in that conversation.
He did just tweet out that and he knows this because he has still has contacts from when he worked in PR and people close to the team. He did say that Lamoriello and scouts had Horvat as their clear cut number one target. And Bo Horvat checks all the boxes: scoring, power play, faceoffs, effort, leadership. They knew the price and gladly paid it. And he says, I'm aware of the downside, but it's the right move. If it doesn't work out, they'll live. Good trade, which aligns with everything he said earlier. Just interesting to get that insight that Horvat was the number one target when Timo Meyer's out there, and other pretty big name players like Patrick Kane. He's out there. I don't know what Ottawa's doing with Alex DeBrincat. So interesting to see that Horvat was the number one guy on the board, but it doesn't surprise me because I feel like he's a Lou Lamoriello guy.
Yes, I would agree with that. For what I was seeing, a lot of people had that same take that this was a Lou Lamoriello guy, and they needed some leadership. I think that something was going on in that locker room. They were not focused. They were not unable to start games or finish games, or they would lose it in the middle. They just didn't have that kind of. They couldn't play a full 60 minutes, and you don't have an Andy Green there anymore. You don't have even a Chara there anymore. Parise is a good leader. I think Anders Lee is a good leader, but they needed something there. I don't think Horvat's necessarily won anything, given he's been with Vancouver forever. I don't know what his World Junior career was, or if he. I don't think he spent that much time in the AHL, if at all, or whatever the case was. So I don't know his history of winning, but he appears to be a very Lou guy in terms of just owning the leadership role. And yeah, to your point about Chris's comment, that's it's exactly what he said. That you all heard just a few moments ago. I do want to mention, because we asked on Twitter what the reactions were, instant reactions to the trade. It is all over the place. So if no matter kind of where you land on this, I think we all have to kind of wait and see. But fans are kind of everywhere on whether it's good or not. Everyone has a different kind of perspective on Beauvillier being sent, a necessary evil. More people rather leaning towards kind of a necessary evil kind of thing, and it sucks. And same thing with Ratu. You just have to get the extension signed. That's a big thing on the Horvat side, on the Islander side of this equation. That seems to be what a lot of you were saying here. If they get him signed, some people are saying that the Islanders fleeced the Canucks. Definitely a take. I don't know. I'm just going to be happy that he's here. I'm not going to worry about what the other team got. Again, I think you got to just kind of move on from that in general.
Yeah, I think it's a fair value trade. Both sides should end up being happy, and it's one of those things where it's so hard to judge a trade instantly. You'll have to look at this in 5 years and see how it worked out. Unless they don't re-sign him, then it's really bad right away.
Yeah, and then it's really bad right away. Yeah, and I don't know how you recover from that. And I that interesting way to end the show, and maybe we should, maybe we can expand on it next week. If Lamoriello cannot sign Horvat, whether or not the Islanders make the playoffs is irrelevant. From there, I don't think Lamoriello is the guy to lead this team forward. I just don't think so. If you can't get him signed after you give all that kind of stuff up, I really think it's over. I think he took a shot. It's not something weird for him to do, but given this isn't the same as those other years in some respects. Although Peugeot was traded for, the Islanders were not doing very well. And I forget where Palmieri was. I think the team was doing a little bit better at that point when they got him. So, even Roman up to some degree, the team wasn't great last season. He just kind of makes one move and crosses his finger. And this is the one move he was making in the season. So if he can't get it signed, and again, whether or not they make the playoffs is almost irrelevant. If he's signed, figure it out in the offseason and kind of move forward. But if he can't get re-signed, I don't think lose the guy. I don't think he could do it. I don't think he's creative enough. And this is a very just structured move. And if it works, great. But if it doesn't, I don't know what this looks like. I don't know what this team looks like moving forward. But wait and see. This may happen. Maybe by the time you're hearing this, he's re-signed. But as it stands right now, he's not. So thanks again to Chris. We'll wrap it up here. Thanks again to Chris Botta for joining us. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Nasselman Hockey. Find James' work at The Fourth Period, and make sure to check out Isles Fix, an excellent created Islanders newsletter. Go use the promo codes. DraftKings, big Super Bowl coming up. Who do you got in the Super Bowl? Eagles? Chiefs?
I don't know. I hate both teams, so just a nightmare for me.
I'm not a huge football fan. I did watch the end of the Chiefs game. I don't know what they're gonna have to tape Mahomes together through that Super Bowl game.
That's why I think the Eagles win.
Yeah, he's got 2 weeks to recover, right?
Yeah.
So, or whatever they're gonna do, pump him up full of whatever NFL players get through, because I don't understand how they make it through even one quarter of that.
Right.
He was still really good. I don't understand the ref thing. I'm not going to comment on that. All I know is I turned to my girlfriend and said, "That's a lot of flags." I do not remember watching a game and seeing this many flags. On both sides, it was a little crazy. But if you're going to bet on the game, use that promo code THPN. And welcome back to Raycon. Super cool to have them back on board with us in THPN. We both have their headphones. Go get them. They're good. Interchange them with my AirPods all the time. I don't always love the silicone, but they work for me here and there. James, for a long one. This is a long episode. Bring us home.
Until next time, all. Good job, Lou Lamoriello.